An unnamed state authority has launched an investigation into Ethereum. So let's talk about how XRP becomes the exit ramp or the arc that saves crypto. The SEC is coming after ETH as a security. I do believe that proof of stake, pure proof of stake, where you put your assets in somebody else's pool to earn a profit, actually will end up being classified a security. Uh, Jury's still out on proof of work, but we know that XRP is not a security. So let's get into, what the potential outcomes of this is going to be and the implications for the broader market, along with, some of what I mentioned in some previous videos and how that could lead to a situation where the majority of the liquidity that's in the crypto market currently in Bitcoin, ETH, and Tether could end up flowing into XRP. So obviously there's some pretty significant headwinds now for ETH that are public. I think that that'll continue. We've seen a lot of the, evidence that there was some potential collusion and other problems for what a lot of people have talked about as ETHgate. Until that's proven in a court of law, I'm going to stay away from that. But there are some pretty serious allegations there. And so now that we do have state authorities looking into the Ethereum Foundation and the SEC pursuing Ethereum as a security, not boding very well for that network. We've already seen a rotation from ETH into Solana. They could be next on the chopping block. The only thing we know for sure, again, is XRP itself, the asset, is not a security. It's the only thing that has clarity here in the US. And so I've talked about before, we've got Japan hiking rates. That could have broader implications for US Treasuries in that market. The FOMC today did not raise rates. They just held them steady, which is what was expected. They're going to continue to stay at 5.25% to 5.5% for the interest rates here in the US. We've also got the digital dollar project joining the Digital Pound Foundation, which is interesting that was announced today as well. So a lot of things moving in the crypto space, a lot of news happening. But with that, let's say we do see Tether come unpegged or sanctions issued against Tether. We saw OKX drop their trading pairs with Tether. I believe it was earlier this week. And that's to be compliant with MiCA and the rules that the EU has put forward. So again, that kind of is interesting that the Digital Dollar Project has now partnered with the Digital Pound Foundation. There were some rumblings early on that MiCA could impact the US's regulation and the way we approached digital assets when we chose to do so. And so it's looking more and more like that's going to be the case. We also had, Coinbase and Circle speak in front of Congress just a little while ago, discussing Tether's potential problems, allowing people to transact on their network in specific jurisdictions without compliance when it comes to KYC, AML, and OFAC sanctions, the other things there. So, illicit parties transacting on the network, doing not so good things. I don't know if Epstein and all of that ends up getting tied in there. We'll see how that plays out. See, those are the two things, kind of looming for Tether and Ethereum. How does Bitcoin roll into this and what's the problem there? Well, every time Tether mints more Tether, there's a direct correlation to an increase in Bitcoin's price. If you look at both the charts, you figure that out. And it's pretty interesting, right? So when we see a reduction in Tether supply, we tend to see a drawback in Bitcoin's price as well. So if we did have a destabilization or a freeze of Tether, that's why I think there could be implications for Bitcoin. I think they're tied. That's not for the backing reason. A lot of people postured a long time ago that Tether would mint Tether and then buy Bitcoin and back the Tether they just minted with the Bitcoin. I think that may have been the case in the beginning, but they have shored themselves up and if you look on their website, it does show that, more than 75% of their reserves are U.S. Treasuries. And that's been verified. They've been audited. So the only real way that they could go down at this point, I don't think the U.S. is going to default on our debt. We can print the money. So the only way Tether really has serious problems is if we do sanction them again for illicit activities and non-compliance, which I think is an inevitability, honestly. So you've got those two dominoes there. Tether then impacts Bitcoin. You have a deleveraging. As people look for an exit, I think XRP and Ripple are going to be coming out of the other side of their lawsuit. We've already had XRP designated that it is not a security. Back last year on July 13th, the judge issued that ruling. And since then, XRP has really just kind of maintained where it's been. Ripple is still under litigation for early sales of XRP, which probably end up having to pay a fine for that. But then we will have, I'm hopeful that we have some type of new test that comes out of this, kind of like the Howey test for securities, but a Ripple test for digital assets to decide whether they are a security or not. And again, one of those things that I think is going to be stipulated there is, are you putting the asset up for profit, invested interest in some other party to do something that allows you to profit? And if that's the case, proof of stake, you're going to stake that with the provider when you put it in their pool. I think that's going to be the piece that divides this. In their pool is going to be a security. If it's delegated proof of stake, I think there's going to be a workaround there. Let's say all of these collapse at one time. There's downward pressure on Ethereum. We get sanctions on Tether. This impacts Bitcoin. Everybody's going to be looking for an exit in crypto. And if you just so happen to have an XRP ETF rolled out by BlackRock, which they had a fake one filed last year in November, so they already have the infrastructure to just use that conduit and roll it right back out. They would just have to file an S1 with the SEC and get it approved, which if Ripple was outside of the lawsuit or there had been a settlement had, I think that would be feasible. So we already do have an XRP ETF also, or it's an ETP in Europe. In the US, we don't have any XRP ETFs. If they rolled that out at the same time, you could have an influx of liquidity from, let's say, the Bitcoin ETFs and the broader market into XRP, while everybody else was looking for the exit door from Ethereum and Tether and Bitcoin. So XRP ends up becoming the ark or the savior, while everything else is crashing down, people are running for the door, and there's XRP in the way. So that's kind of what I see playing out. I'm speculating here. Nobody has a crystal ball. They don't know the future. But I'm kind of trying to read the tea leaves and put it out to you guys in a way that's understandable. Again, the domino theory had a lot of traction. Appreciate everybody that watched that video. And hopefully this gives you some insight into how XRP can become the savior or the ark for not just the crypto markets, but broader markets at scale. If we do have implications for broader markets where, the losses in Bitcoin, because it settles T+2, causes downward pressure on the general stock market. They have to pull from those positions in order to cover losses here to make people whole. It's not a rosy picture that gets painted during an election year for the administration. So it'd be interesting to see how things play out, but I think this scenario is likely. So if you do own XRP, and I'll just say this here, nothing on this channel is ever financial advice. Always consult with your financial advisor before making any investment decisions. This is only for educational and entertainment purposes only. But, and I have fully disclosed, I have a large position in XRP personally. So I do have biases and vested interest. So take everything with a grain of salt. But, I'm hopeful that this doesn't happen. It could have horrible implications for a lot of people. There would be a lot of people that would cry and have a lot of problems if this does occur. But again, reading the tea leaves, this is kind of what I see playing out. So hopefully this has been informative for you. If you do like this content, if you'd like to see more, you can check out other videos on the channel. Please like, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.